r/AskReddit by Redmond Dts. What is the most unusual excuse you've ever heard of from somebody calling off work? I used to manage a small team at an IT help desk. One morning, my most punctual reliable employee didn't show up. He calls me 2 hours into his shift, sounding genuinely panicked. "I'm so sorry. I can't come in today. I'm trapped." Trapped? What do you mean trapped? Is everything okay? Yes, I'm fine, but there's a moose on my porch and it's been sleeping in front of my door for 3 hours. I can't get out. I was completely silent, trying to process if this was an elaborate prank. I just told him to keep me updated. An hour later, he emailed me a picture from his upstairs window. There, magnificently and absurdly, was a full-grown moose, curled up and fast asleep on his front steps like a giant antlered dog. It's the only time in my career I've had to log active moose as the official reason for an absence. My grandparents had a medical emergency years ago, where one got stuck on the toilet, and when the other tried to help, they fell and knocked themselves unconscious. My employer demanded details and didn't believe me because it sounded like an SNL skit. I've responded to this exact 911 more than twice this year already. Not unconscious, so much as fallen or otherwise injured themselves helping a loved one off the toilet. I emailed the office that I wouldn't be in for a few days because my then wife had had our son in the front seat of my car on the side of the turnpike. They knew he was due any day, and we were actually on the way to the hospital. He just came faster than we expected. I got an email back from a coworker with a link to a local news article saying, "I thought I recognized your car." Colleague rang my boss one morning after a rather important football match. "Boss, what would happen if I came into work drunk?" "You'd be fired." "Right boss, what would happen if I rang in and said I couldn't come in because I was drunk?" "You'd get a written warning." "Okay boss." "What would happen if I didn't come in today but didn't give you a reason?" "A verbal warning." "Cheers boss, I'll take that." A plane landed on the expressway, preventing traffic from using the road. A guy I worked with in retail 15 years ago called in to say he had a nightmare and didn't think he'd be able to get back to sleep or come into work 5 hours later. My wife called me from home while I was at work one day. I asked her why she was home instead of at work, and she said, "I called in sick." I asked her what was wrong. She replied, "There's a big bug by the door." We lived in garden apartment with only one entrance, and she couldn't get out because of the bug. I told her to step on it. She was too afraid. I told her to sick our Jack Russell on it. She, the dog, was definitely not afraid of bugs. So that's what she did. She took the dog over to it, pointed it out, and the dog went over to it, sniffed it, and walked away. Upon further examination, it turned out the bug was actually just a ball of loose thread. These are the dangers of not wearing your glasses, I guess. Decades ago, had a shift runner for a pizza chain I managed in a large city, just no call no show for 4 days. He came in to turn in his uniform, knowing he missed shifts, thinking he was fired. He was a medium height super quiet fire plug of a guy. He was 24 years old, grew up in drug-infested projects, had a wife and 2 little girls. Super responsible otherwise for like a year. The only thing he said was a few years ago he borrowed some money from a guy he came up with when he was out of work. He paid him back, but still owed the guy, who was like upper management in a regional drug hierarchy. Anyway, he said he couldn't tell me and understood if I had to fire him. I didn't, and this guy was on time like always, and eventually became a store manager and moved his young family into a decent part of the city. I left the company and area not long after he got promoted. But it taught me how unreal hard it is to rise out of those situations, as there's always tentacles trying to pull you back. It's been 35 years, and I still think about that guy, know his name, and I hope he's doing well and has a bunch of grandkids. Not work, but a college class with a pretty strict attendance policy. I delivered a message to the professor that my friend couldn't come that day because she thought one of her guppies might give birth. To prevent cannibalism, the recommendation was to separate the babies from the adults ASAP. Professor accepted this as an excused absence, lol. Colleague emailed me to tell me he'd be out of town and unable to review the materials I sent him. I was frustrated because I work in print publishing and deadlines really don't care about your vacation. Checked in with another colleague to see if he agreed that I should follow up with him by phone regardless. It turns out he was not just out of town. He was in Antarctica doing research. Back in my retail days, one girl didn't show up, so we called her and she said, "I forgot that I worked there." As in forgot they worked for our store, not forgot they worked that day. It was the most insane excuse I'd ever heard as a manager. She'd worked with us for like 3 weeks. She forgot forever because she never came back. One of my daughter's primary school teachers had to take a day off because her beagle had climbed onto the roof of her house. Again. Years ago during the mob wars in St. Louis, we had a girl calling into work saying that she was behind a car that blew up on the highway. She was a known exaggerator, so we laughed it off. Turned out it was true. True story, my vagina has a fever. I did not say this, but an older lady called in sick, and that's her excuse. Had a second shift QA job in my 5th packing house. Not a gov inspector, not on the line, not a supervisor, hated by all. Morbidly depressed after 6 months. Woke up one morning and felt great, mentally and physically. Called in, "I'm calling in well. I feel great and won't ruin it by coming to work today. Boss said I'll have to write you up tomorrow." Have at it. Send out a resume and left a month later. I called out once because there was a scorpion in my bed that stung me 10+ times and I was in an helicopter being medevaced. Called out once because a pack of javelina were encircling my car. Called out once because there was a mama cougar hanging out on my back wall with a baby on the ground. Called out once because a saguaro fell over onto my house and I had to prove to the feds that I didn't knock it over. Called out on 2 separate occasions because I got stuck in a hurricane and missed my flight home. Called out once because I was helping rescue a friend's horses from a wildfire that was moving toward their ranch. I think that's pretty much it for my wild excuses. I don't really get sick, so I don't call out unless I really can't get to work. I think I'd move if I were you. I did. They couldn't come in because their neighbor's dog ate their car keys. One guy said he couldn't come in because his goldfish was depressed and he needed to be there emotionally. I had a coworker call in, tell our boss he couldn't come in because his balls were so swollen from doing a bunch of coke and jerking off for 8 hours. My sister is a manager in retail and she had on older women call in because her hemorrhoids were acting up and texted a close-up picture of her hemorrhoids. Forgot to change my clock for daylight savings. We had this guy who would always be 1 hour late to work on the Monday after we changed the clocks. But the guy was an idiot. He'd pull this excuse as we roll back as well as when we roll forward. By that logic, you'd be an hour early 1 day a year and an hour late 1 day a year. Ages and ages ago I worked at Walmart stocking groceries. One day I was just worn out, so I called in and told them that I had apathy. My supervisor, who wasn't terribly bright, didn't miss a beat. He told me to rest up and be back tomorrow. The next day, his boss came over to me and said, "I'm going to let that apathy thing slide because it was hilarious, but don't ever do it again." One girl said she got lost on her way to work and ended up in a different state. Someone called in a bomb threat at the Walmart across the street. Police are everywhere. I'm too scared to leave my house. I was once caught in an active shooter situation and couldn't leave the building. My boss was understanding. It was also on the news, so she knows I was being honest. They dropped a frozen turkey on their bare foot. Their neighbor's house was broken into, and they shot the intruder. They couldn't leave because there was police tape all around their property, and the mobile investigation vehicle was blocking their driveway. He said he heard what sounded like a couple of thumps early in the morning, and assumed the neighbor dropped something. It was the sound of his neighbor's .57 revolver being discharged, followed by the intruder hitting the ground. An employee who rang in, saying he couldn't come in because his dog had pissed in his shoe, and he only had one pair. I once heard a coworker called in sunburnt. Weird, but to be fair, she was very light-skinned, so I imagine it was pretty bad. That's all folks. Thank you for watching. If you like videos like this one, why not like and subscribe for more? Have a nice evening.